Hi, everyone, and welcome back to LogTech Live. I'm Eric Johnson, your host as usual, if not always. I am delighted to be joining you from my office. This is, I think, the first episode I've actually done from my actual company office. This is a room in our S&P office in Washington, D.C., beautiful Washington, D.C. I'm really excited to be joining you today for our sort of last episode of 2023, our pre-holiday extravaganza. There will be a cast of thousands. Santa come. No, we're not doing any of that. It's just because it's before the holidays doesn't mean we aren't doing what we normally do here at LogTech Live, which is talk with some of the coolest, smartest, uh, in this case today, funniest people in the industry. Um, so before we get going, first of all, to those of you for this is your first episode, I'm delighted you could join us today and hope you enjoy everything we do at LogTech Live. For those of you who join us regularly, thank you so much for the support. I literally only do this because you guys are tuning in every 2 weeks. Um, we have a great show today. I have a fantastic guest, one of my absolute favorite people in the industry. I've been sort of like he's been my like fire extinguisher. Like, when am I going to get this guy on my show? And it turns out today is the day. So I will introduce him in a second. But just to run through a few things, you're seeing on the banner roll by. That's of course the best place to reach me, I guess, is Twitter, logtech at logtech Eric. Um, I also do a weekly newsletter at eric.johnson at substack.com, not at Substack. Jeez, it's like my first rodeo, evidently. eric.johnson.substack.com. That newsletter is probably going to be a little late today, just due to some schedule log jams, unfortunately. I will try to get it out today, if not today, at some point next week, because I have a great one. It's just a matter of getting it actually out to you all. You also notice that it's an unusual time today, 11:30 instead of 10 a.m. Eastern. So I appreciate it, those of you who've accommodated the time change, and hopefully we'll make it worth your while. Just a couple things before I get into the news of the week. TPM Tech and TPM 23 are right around the corner. Literally, I think we're something like 8 weeks out, until maybe 9 weeks until TPM Tech in Long Beach on February 23rd. As always, new registrants can get a pass for either TPM Tech, TPM 23, or a bundle package. Just use the code that's scrolling below you, EJ TPM 25, to get 25% off passes. Would love to see you there. A lot of what we discuss on this show every month are topics that we're going to be talking about on site at TPM Tech. So would love to see you all in Long Beach, instead of in a little square box on your computer. So let's get into some news of the week that I found interesting. I'm going to start off with a topic that you've heard me talk about before, and we'll definitely have a guest on to kind of go into some of the particulars of this. And that is electronic bills of lading in ocean freight. So an interesting thing happened this week, and it's not like, the most earth-shattering news, and it's something that we've hinted at before as being really vital to the adoption of EBLs in the container industry, is interoperability. And so two vendors, you may or may not have heard of them, CargoX and eDocs Online, did essentially a test to see whether a EBL generated in transferred to another party that needed the document electronically in their system. And it was a successful test. And the reason that's important is because not everybody is going to be using the same product, the same EBL product. There are 6-7 vendors out there. Shipping lines, shippers, forwarders are all going to be using their product of choice. In some cases, a product might be foisted upon one of those parties. So having interoperability between the products is really vital. Otherwise, you just end up in different sort of like worlds that are all running parallel to one another, and you can only use the product if this shipping line, if you work with this shipping line, and the shipping line can only target certain shippers because they favor another type of product. So you need that interoperability. This story goes into that. Definitely encourage you to read it, and definitely progress. We've seen progress this year. That's still a almost laughably low number of containers are moving on EBL as of today. So there's a lot of progress to still be made. So the next story I'm going to highlight, and by the way, that story and the next story both showcase a new website that we at Journal of Commerce just launched, I believe, last Saturday. So we're like a week into this now. We're really excited about it. We've been working behind the scenes on it a lot for the last 2 years, and so we're really excited about it. There's some wrinkles to it that I will go into in a future episode. There's especially around data that we're really excited about. But for the meantime, those of you who have subscription, go on and play around. It's a new playground. If you don't have a subscription, I encourage you to subscribe and see what you're missing. So this next story, freight broker. This is interesting development, and one that I might get into with our guest today. Between Uber Freight, JB Hunt, and Convoy, all announced last week that they were working together on developing standards around truckload appointment scheduling. Why does this matter? This is an example, unusual example of brokers working together that would theoretically be competitive with one another, but working together to sort of get over the hump on something that's not really a competitive differentiator, or ought not to be, right? Like the ability to efficiently schedule an appointment it ought not to be something that advanced software companies or 3PLs with a lot of capital at their disposal ought to be spending time on. So essentially what these companies decided at some point earlier in 22 was, let's down our arms for a bit, figure out if we can come to sort of an agreement point on what goes into this from a development perspective, a technology perspective, and then build product on top of that once we've solved this problem that's sort of universal across brokers. So really interesting. No guarantee that it will be successful. The list of failed standards that have been attempted to be developed within the logistics industry, both domestic and international, could fill up a giant graveyard at this point. But really interesting idea, and also the names involved. They're not small parties in the industry. So we'll see if this actually catches hold and other parties, which they want to join in on this, actually do. And okay, so the last piece I will highlight is my newsletter from last week, which touched on a really interesting issue for me. I've been focusing on ocean freight rate management for a very long time. It feels like one of the categories that sort of predates the VC, Cambrian explosion of technology over the last decade. This is a set of providers that really emerged out of the dot-com era that were trying to help predominantly 3PLs, international 3PLs, so NVOs, freight forwarders, help them sort of structure their rate sheets that they received from carriers in a way that they could more accurately and quickly quote to shippers. So this category has been a while. I had an interesting conversation with a very large shipper a few weeks back, and he was asking, is there something for me? Is there something for shippers? And the interesting thing from my perspective was, I had a tough time kind of pointing him in the direction of any companies that focus on rate management for shippers. It's always been a play from a software perspective about sort of making more efficient the ingestion of rates and the provision of rates to a shipper, rather than a shipper being able to sort of like harmonize all of its rates across every ocean carrier, forwarder, NVO they get into one place and decide what's the best one to go with. So I wrote about that this week and why that sort of part of the market developed the way it did, in my view. So definitely encourage you to read that. And again, I will hopefully have this week's newsletter out at some point in the next, I'm going to say pre-New Year, hopefully, just to give myself as much buffer as possible. But with that, I am now delighted to invite my guest for this week, Ryan Schreiber of Metaphora. Ryan, you're VP of Industry and Growth. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, job titles are like stupid anyway, in my opinion. So like, yeah, I mean, sounds right.
I think you changed it like every week just to throw people off, right? Like, yeah.
So one time I was talking to some folks at another industry rag, and I referred to someone as like the CRO or equivalent because I was like, I don't know if it's actually their job title, but they're like the most. And it was just like a running gag for the longest time. So yeah, I'm like, whatever my job title is or equivalent, but like,
Yeah,
what
or
does
equivalent.
industry and growth even mean? Like who knows? So you know,
Well, it's a good
there's a great
icebreaker. It's a good icebreaker.
100%.
Yeah.
There's a great story about the Under Armour CEO when he first got started. He was a one man show, and he had two sets of business cards. He had one that said CEO, obviously, and he had one that said regional sales manager. And so he would use whatever one mattered. And it's like because he's a one man show. Like, what difference does it make? And I think that's the truth, right? I mean, it's like it's not kind of like what your job title is. It's like what you
What you
do,
do.
like or what you are doing, and like where you're doing it. If you're the CEO of a one man shop, if it eventually becomes Amazon or Under Armour or whatever, great. But if you're like otherwise, like you're just you're a guy and you're trying to
It's
stand something up, and that's great.
it's like for those of us old enough to have remembered In Living Color, the skit show where remember the
Yeah,
family that all had like 12 jobs and one of them only
yeah,
had 3 jobs and he was like, this he only has 3 jobs.
yeah.
So
It's like
um
vanity metrics. You were talking a little bit about that with Chad on the episode I watched earlier today, but like, it's a vanity metric. It's like,
yeah.
this is my title. I feel really good about it. So, also, I need a raise and a promotion. So, shout out if Peter's watching this. Like, come on.
There you
Like,
go. There you go. I demand it. So for a lot of people know you already. You're not an unknown person in this industry. And for those of you who've seen Ryan before, it's usually a very serious, sober examination of the
yeah.
transportation industry. Um, it's not that at all for those of you who've never heard Ryan talk. So prepare yourself for the next 30 minutes. Tell me a little bit about your background and what Metaphora is and sort of what you do on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis and who your customers are. So
I like to, I do hope that like what I say has value. I like to try and marry the like irreverent with like, with actual insightfulness
you,
about
you,
problems.
you're giving
So,
people sugar with the medicine. I take the same approach, right?
yeah. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
really boring to talk in
Yeah.
you
But then
said.
also like my favorite thing to do is troll people on LinkedIn who post like, the live, laugh, love type posts. Like again, I'll mention chat again. I trolling chat on LinkedIn right now is like my job. So go watch the last episode, where Eric was on with the Chad Olson of AVRL, and Chad's a good dude, even if he doesn't seem like it. And so just trolling him all day, and then I'll text him on the side about how I'm trolling him. But yeah, so I've been in transportation logistics primarily with a domestic focus for coming up on 15 years. I started my career at one of the large brokerages, and then I've started a few businesses in the space and had varying levels of success, including a tech company. And then I've been with Metaphora for about 4 years now. We're a consultant. We focus just on transportation, logistics, and supply chain. So, we do traditional sort of strategy consulting, and we also do software development for the industry. So, my job is kind of like to be. I said it. I've been saying recently a mascot. I said it to you, right? In the green room. You know, um, I talk to people about their business, and I talk to people about what's going on in the industry, and I just try and be as connected as I can to help us kind of understand where the puck is going and help our customers and friends understand where the puck is going, as Wayne Gretzky once said. So
Yeah,
I have the best job in the world because my job is really just like talk to people and get them excited about what's possible, and then eventually sell them some stuff that makes their businesses better than it was yesterday.
cool. And for those who have been living under a rock the last year, Metaphora is the rebrand
Carrier
from
direct,
what used
yeah.
to be Carrier Direct. But if you
Yeah.
don't know that by now, you're probably not in the transportation
Although
industry.
if you like, I've gotten like probably 15 people this year have come up to me and congratulated me on my new
Your
job.
new job,
So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's a LinkedIn thing, right? Like
yeah,
even if I've not, yeah, we went
yeah,
through that, getting going through the merger between our old holding company and the new one.
yeah.
So
That's right. Yeah,
like, all right, we could talk about a million different things, but let's maybe, consider kind of the conversations that you have with your clients, or, just conversations you're having with people in the market, even if they're not your clients. Um, I care about how people are sort of wrestling with that constant decision of like, do I need tech? What tech do I need? What are the
Yeah.
vendors? What headaches am I looking at? What would you say you're getting asked about the most right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the question that I've been getting asked the most hasn't really changed in at least since the COVID shut-in started, but even really probably before, which is, what's the role of software in my business? And that encapsulates a bunch of the stuff that you just said, which is like, do I need it? Where do I need it? What value does it bring, et cetera? Like, and pretty much everybody at this point in transportation logistics has just been sold something, right?
Mm,
And like then they're mad about the fact they got sold something, which I blame them for that candidly, but which we can certainly talk about as well. But they've gotten sold something and now they're like, I don't know about this, that, or the other. So I think that is just the most common question. What do I need? What don't I need? And where does it fit? And for me, as much as I love technology and as much as I'm a huge proponent of software in your business, but it has to start with your business. And you have to really understand the challenges that you're facing in the business, what problems you're trying to solve, so that you can assess what and where, because there's not one software company out there that absolutely everybody needs to be working with. There's not.
right.
And so that's the, but that's the rub sometimes, is people get caught up in what the Joneses are doing, or what I saw this cool flashy shiny thing, and it doesn't necessarily fit their business. So I think it all has to start with the business and the people in your business, because people are still at the center of the machine.
That's super interesting. And so what you just said, I a million% agree with. And it's the idea that there is a single sort of fix, or one company has a fix for every single, even within,
Yeah.
even within like the mid-sized broker segment, right? Like the idea
Uh-huh.
that every one company in
Mhm.
that niche needs to be working with the same vendor is totally a misnomer,
Yeah.
and one that's out there, right? So and this obviously boils down to the fragmentation that we all know exists in the, like, the provider side of the
Yeah.
market. And it's
Yeah.
also on the vendor side, right? Like, as
Yeah.
much as we hear about certain names, there's still a million names. Like Chad is someone who just came on my radar within the
Yeah.
last 3 4 months, right? And
Yeah.
like he wasn't in my headspace, and now he is, and that's just
Right.
another name that I know is a factor in this market, right? So
Right. Yeah, I mean, and even if you talk about, like, you talked about fragmentation, and like I was talking to a good industry friend recently who recently had an exit and is now thinking about his next thing, and it's like, I'm going to build a TMS. And I'm like, everybody knows how I feel.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
But I said to him, I
Yeah.
said, number one, like, there aren't any good TMSs, but number two, we also don't need more of them because there's a ton of fragmentation. But
Right.
a question I get a lot is like, what's the best TMS? And it's like, well, it like, there is no one right answer for that, because even if you just strip away all the long tail TMSs and look at just I'm a solid down the line mid market trucking company. What's the best TMS for me? Like, there's not a good, because it all starts with your business and your business operation. And it's just, and it's a fool's errand to think that there's one that is the best, irrespective of everything, of all the particulars of your business. Even if you build something,
Yeah.
you can't build for every potential situation that you're going to face. So and then I think there's an over reliance on technology as well. As much as I love it, sometimes there's an under reliance and sometimes there's an over reliance. I'll get
Mhm.
messages on LinkedIn probably once a week. It's actually slowed down, probably because I talk about this enough on podcasts, where people are like, what TMS should I be on? And the first question I have for them is like, how big are you?
Mm.
And usually their answer, for some reason, usually the answer of the people who message me on LinkedIn is, I'm 5 million, I'm 1 million, I just started, I'm 10 million. And my answer is always, it doesn't matter. Like I ran a $30 million brokerage off of spreadsheets, off of Google Sheets for a while, and
Mm.
did everything off Google Sheets, and like it didn't matter. And so really, like, the key is, if you're so worried about your TMS or whatever, you're missing the point, which is build your business. The bigger, the more complex, et cetera, the software decisions you're making in your business, the more that distracts from growing your business. Now, on the flip side of that, there are certainly points at which that becomes a blocker, and inefficiency really matters, and your cost to serve becomes uncompetitive, and you're slowing your own growth. So there's definitely a line there. But yeah, I mean, I think you're making a good point about fragmentation, and even when you strip it away, it's like
Oh,
still a
okay. So
challenge.
let me throw what you just said. Let me play devil's advocate for what you just said. So
Please do.
because a lot of companies find themselves in the situation where, yeah, I was heads down building the business, and then some problem that, if I had built the technology to sort of help
Hmm.
with it at an early stage, even if it was way ahead of where I needed it to be right now I'm too big, and then I become one of those million big
Yeah.
companies for which technology, incorporating tech is a major headache, as opposed to like sort of letting it grow right with me.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're saying. First of all, I always I'm wrong. I like to say I'm wrong a lot. I'm wrong a lot. And so I'm always open to kind of like thinking about something differently or whatever. I also, like, my background is as an attorney. So the way that I work through problems is adversarially, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to argue my point. So sometimes that's confusing for people. But Eric, I think that's a great point. And what I would say back is, well, it's a math equation. You can't solve for every potential problem that your business might face.
Mm,
What your job is to do is to look at your business and plan for the reasonably foreseeable problems that you might have. Now, you live in DC, or you live around DC.
yeah.
DC is a swamp, as we all know, and it's also like coastal, sort of.
Don't even go
Do you
there
have
with me. I've got
do you
some
have
big,
flood insurance?
like, you do not know how, like, applicable that question is at this very moment. I won't go into details, but it's amazing that you asked me that question. I
Because
don't
but
have
the
I don't have flood insurance because the house is not in a flood zone, but
But it's not in a flood zone. However, what in a flood zone means is a bit subjective, right?
sure, very true.
Not in a flood zone just means, from a math perspective, it is
Right.
very, very unlikely that your house is going to get flooded. However,
It's not
it's
impossible.
not a zero. It's not
Yeah.
literally impossible.
Right.
And I mean, I live in Austin, Texas, or outside of Austin, Texas. In central Texas can get 100-year floods, whatever. I also don't live in a floodplain. But let's say, there's scenarios where, like, a thing gets clogged, whatever. All of a sudden, my house floods, but I don't have, and my house is like 5 feet off. I have, like, my foundation's kind of, and so that's the point, right? You're not
Right.
out there
Yeah, good point.
insuring against every possible problem that could happen.
Yeah.
If it comes up, bad luck. Take your licks, bad luck. Sorry, like, them's the breaks.
Right.
But, like, you probably want to retire one day, so you save for retirement. Because that's a like, you might die before you ever get to retirement, but that's unlikely.
Right.
Right, and so you do this, you don't do that, and that's kind of how to think about it.
So that's the I guess we could sort of couch that in the needs versus wants sort of segmentation, right? Like, there's certain things that I may want, but that's not a likely thing that I'm going to need in that short period of time.
Right.
So let's
And it's
focus
a
on
it,
what
it
you
can be
do
a
need.
false positive too, right? Because, like, if you
Yeah.
go into a scenario where you buy 15 things, because it's not one thing, right? It's
Yeah.
the reality is, you're worried about 100 things that might happen, but only one of them is going to happen.
Yeah.
If you talk about statistically, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you have flood insurance, and you have, like, earthquake insurance, you got whatever on your house, only one of those things is going to happen in your lifetime. You don't know which one, but if you
Right.
insure for all of them, you're going to go broke, and then you're not going to save for retirement. You're never going to retire, and you're going to be writing the newsletter
This is
forever.
amazing. Literally did not think we'd be doing the flood insurance analogy of tech, but it's awesome. It's a great way. It's a super good framework to think about it.
Thank you.
Um, you mentioned something that I did want to get into, so I'm glad you mentioned it already, about sort of like expectations people have when they invest in tech. What do you see as sort of when you're helping a client and they're like, we're really expecting that when we invest in in this system, it's going to do X, Y, and Z, and you're like, well, you can also believe that the tooth
Yeah.
fairy is real. Like in your head, maybe, or you probably just say it out loud, but
Yeah, I do say it out loud. You're right. I've been told a million times that I expect too much out of software, so like I might be the wrong person to answer this question in some respects, but I
okay.
don't think that that's true about me.
No, I wouldn't say
So
that.
the reality is, when I think the biggest unrealistic expectation that you're highlighting here is that other people will change their behavior so that you will benefit from the application of software in your business. People look at things like Uber Taxi, they look at where all of a sudden a market was made and a bunch of people changed their behavior and they say, "Okay, great. Well, if I go buy a digital booking tool, all of a sudden my carriers will book digitally." And
Yeah,
they won't.
yeah.
And so like external parties, before I joined Metaphora, my last kind of like when I left my last business, I did like an exam, I kind of talked to a bunch of people in my network. There was two finalists. The other finalist was working on a futures exchange for transportation. And I'm super bullish on the concept broadly in like the long term. But the reason I didn't do it and I did Metaphora was because I'm always willing to bet on myself, but I won't bet on other people to do what I want them to do. And so,
Mhm.
you know, people would have to change their behavior for that thing to work. And I didn't know that the time horizon could work out that way, right? In terms of funding, in terms of also my performance expectations for myself, for them, whatever. So the same thing is true here. So I think that the real key is people won't change their behavior de facto. And that's extra, that's broadly external, but even internal software products. Like you need to, if you focus on the business problems you want to solve within the four walls of your business, there are so many of those that are still existent that you could work on. And then that it's not just an elixir, right? It's not a magic bullet. You're going to have to change some things within the four walls of your business to maximize the impact of that. Like I just use digital booking again really
Mhm.
quickly. Like,
Yeah.
right now, the state of the environment, digital booking tools are the same. The loads that digital booking tools are most likely to book are also the easiest to book. Are the same ones that are easiest for humans
For
to book
humans to
or
feel,
match.
totally.
So if you don't change the way that the humans within your business are attacking the loads available to you, matching them to drivers or matching them to personal transportation carriers, whatever it might be, they're going to cannibalize each other
Yep.
and they're going to be adversarial in ways that they don't need to be. And the incentivization is tied up in that, all of these other things. So that's the key, really, is like the unrealistic expectation is no one's going to do what you want them to do just because you bought some software.
It's all
I think
good.
I cut it out.
This
Yeah.
is LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn.
All right, good.
It's not a children's program.
Yeah.
Um,
If any children are watching, they should turn off right now.
no, come on.
Or it's to put them to nap time. Yeah,
That's more like it, right? My dog loves
Mhm.
falling asleep to the dulcet tones of logistics talk.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that I love that sort of discussion about expecting expecting an outcome that depends on behavior you can't control, because that's a huge part of the transportation industry, right? Is motivating people or trying to motivate people to do something that they're not used to doing. Sometimes they think it's against their best interest. And I'm gonna circle around to, we had to talk TMS because
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is sort of like your signature issue, and I want people who have not heard you talk about this to hear. But I want to couch it in that what you just said, which is my feeling about TMS has always been, there's this idea out there that a TMS can somehow cater to every single party,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? If not perfectly equally, at least everyone getting value from it. And my contention has always been someone is investing in the TMS. Someone has to
Mm-hmm.
be there. There's not like a shipper and a carrier and a broker who all kind of get together and be like, hey, let's go in on this like a timeshare.
Mm-hmm.
Like someone is buying it and they want, if
Yeah.
not most of the value, they want all of the value from it.
Yeah.
And that essentially means it is a zero sum game because you're not going to be able to
Well,
get it. So that is my intro to for you to go and talk about.
it's funny you say the thing about a zero sum game. I was talking to a TMS. This is probably like, they're a pretty well known up and coming TMS these days. And it was when they were still in stealth, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I was talking to the founder um, and he was talking about collaboration. It's a collaboration platform. And I said, here's the thing that you're missing about our industry. Right now, it's really a negative sum game. Players in the space will give up positive outcomes. Some will give up positive outcomes for themselves as long as they know that you're losing out. Like if I could get 3 and you could get 1,
Right.
but I could get 2 and you could get -1,
I'll
I'll
take
take 2 over 3.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that happens all the time when we look at our space. But, and so I don't even know that, coming together in a kumbaya scenario isn't necessarily even enough because, there's all kinds of, there's all other things tied up in that. I mean, EDI is supposed to be a standard, but no one adheres to the standard.
Right.
Um, so what you're referring to is my nonprofit, Friends Don't Let Friends TMS.org. And, it's actually, so it is a little bit anti TMS, like specifically like the TMSs that exist because, their business models in some respects are really broken. They make a lot of money from friction of, of working with their customers. And there's almost an adversarial. I mean, go to any TMS conference and every TMS conference that you go to, everyone there is talking about their experience of work. Hey, I love it, whatever, but also they're the worst. Like there's always that like other part of it. And a lot of it, the story I tell, I was a customer of a big TMS for several years, and I paid for custom implementation, and they pushed an update that broke something that I'd custom implemented. And I'm like, hey, you broke this thing because of your update. And they're like, cool. Approve 4 hours of discovery to talk about how much it's going to cost to fix it. I'm like, wait a second. I have to pay you $750 to tell you how much more I have to pay you to fix the thing that I paid you to build that you broke. That business model is broken and it happens across the board. But more sort of philosophically, what you just described about it being everything for everyone is really the thing. I mean, historically, right, the way TMS is a core load execution platform. It's all just about executing the transaction the same way an ERP is, right? The same way an an accounting system. If you use that concept, it's a ledger. It's a system of record. But over time, and largely probably because of how software is built and also demands of the customer or whatever, the thing we have in our minds about what a TMS is has grown to mean it has to do all of these things. It has to do carrier management. It has to do routing guides. It has to do tendering. It has to do all of these things. And so really, Friends Don't Let Friends TMS is about the concept of let's decouple this term and realize that like the problems that we're trying to solve with software in our business aren't solved by TMS. TMS is a piece, and it may be the centerpiece, it may be the crown jewel, but it can't and shouldn't do everything for you. It's about piecing together best in class software that's right for your use cases, right? And what you need from a system of record, and then what you need from rating, from tendering, from driver management, from maintenance, et cetera, and so forth, in a way that allows your users also not to like have kind of what I call UI proliferation. But that at its core is what Friends Don't Let Friends TMS.org is about. It's really about this, like, we need to think differently about that problem. A better mousetrap doesn't solve it.
Very, very interesting. There was a really cool Twitter thread from a guy named Zach Fredericks who referred to you on this issue. earlier this week about the Transporion deal, which was obviously a
Yeah.
huge piece of news that I didn't get a chance to report on yet. And encourage you to look this up. I've retweeted it on my account. And he goes into some of the things that you talk
Yeah.
about how ill-suited a TMS is to be what we have in our head is this like
That's
sort of
right.
collaboration platform. So okay, I'll have a TMS vendor on the show at some point to like defend themselves as the the nirvana of transportation.
Yeah.
So okay, another question I had for you that I don't have a very clear idea on, so I'm hoping you can help me understand and maybe by proxy the audience. What's the
If I
difference
understand it, we'll
between
see.
What's the difference between a freight broker, a digital freight matching company, and a freight marketplace in your view?
So I get this question from time to time. The key is who's making the take decision.
Okay.
And what so like what activities are sort of like happening, but at its core it's who's making the take decision, right? So a freight broker on one end of the spectrum, even if it's happening digitally, the take decision is still made by the broker or the carrier, right?
Yeah. Yep.
A marketplace is not, that's not happening. No, each party is still making the take decision there. They're just suggesting that you two parties are good for each other. It's almost like match.com. It's like, hey, based on what I know about you and what you know about me, but match.com's not the dating game. The match.com's not saying you guys have to go on a date and here's where you're going, right? So that's ultimately, I think, at the core, the the differentiator between those two. What was the third one that was kind of in the middle?
Freight
A freight.
marketplace.
Well, there
Oh,
was, so
sorry,
it's broker.
digital freight matching.
So digital freight matching, it would just be, it's just, in my opinion, is how I would use it, I suppose, is that is a tool to facilitate making the take decision, right? So if you have something like Freight Friend or Parade AI or something like that you're talking about, right? All they're doing is taking information from the carrier and the broker on what their take decision is and executing that take decision.
Okay.
Right. So they might offer, they'll say the broker says, I have load 1, 2, 3 that pays $700 and here's all and carrier says, I'll take it for $700. They're just communicating that back and forth.
So it's the connection between the
Yeah.
the
It's the
concept
TMS of executing
execution.
the
Yeah, it's
digital.
executing
Yeah.
that match, right?
It's the
Okay.
TMS of executing the match. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's a very convoluted thing to put on a business card. So
Yeah.
who uses business cards anyway? Why am I even using
I
that?
do. It's funny. I always think about how silly it is that I still use business card. I still carry them. I still have them. I still give them out at conferences. And I think it's so silly. What was technology that was before its time? Do you remember Bump? When iPhones first came out, there was an app called
Oh, you
Bump.
could scan all the business cards and it would save all your
You would
information.
just you would
Yeah.
just like touch, you would like whatever. And now with NFC, the proliferation of NFC, the Bump would be a great app to bring back. That's just like, here's my here, just connect it with me on LinkedIn, and here's like, I add you contact to my CSV or whatever, or something like that.
Yeah,
There's
I think that is. I was waiting. I feel like at some point there was a thing, and maybe I'm just totally dreaming about this. I was actually just talking about this the other day. Wasn't there some technology where you would literally touch your phones and some Bluetooth thing would like exchange information
Yeah,
between the
that was
two?
Bump.
Oh,
That's what
so
I'm
that's
talking
common.
about.
Okay, right. I was thinking of the
But
business
like, it
part.
was just a little bit more complicated because you had like, you had like the Bluetooth, whatever. Now
Yeah,
with NFC, it's just like boom,
yeah, yeah,
and there are some apps that try and do this, but like this, another rant for another day is like software trying to do too much. Like,
right, right.
solve a simple problem, focus
Yeah.
on solving that problem the best you can, and then like don't worry about other features. Like, let somebody else figure out the other
I need a
features.
Honda Civic, not a Formula One car, right? Like,
Yeah. And then like,
um,
but it's like, oh, but Formula One's higher up market and people are going to pay more for that. And so I should.
that's right. They'll eventually, to my earlier question, they'll eventually need a Formula One car. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
right. That's right.
okay, so we are just about out of time. I have one question for you, and then the traditional one that I end the show with. So predictions for give me something off the wall that you think might happen next year. I won't hold you to it, I promise.
Something off the wall that might happen next year specifically. I think that next year you are going to see I think you are going to see a small or mid-market carrier adopt a meaningful number of autonomous trucks in their fleet.
In what
Like
like segment? Like what I mean, like long haul,
like yeah, like over the like long haul. Like it's not going to be for like local, obviously like the local work, et cetera, and so forth. It's really going to be
like El Paso to Phoenix.
terminal to terminal type,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think you're going to see you think you're going to see a company adopt a meaningful number of those vehicles. And that, like I don't think that's going to be 1,000 or even 500, but more than one.
Mm,
It's going to be 10, 15 maybe. I think that'll happen this year. And I don't think that that's going to signal, like, I'm not saying we're going to have all the drivers are going to be out of jobs next year, whatever. I want to be very clear about it. Like I think that somebody is going to say, you know what, this is worth doing, and go in on it and partner with somebody that has those vehicles.
cool. All right. Well, we'll see if that actually comes to pass. Do you
Yeah,
see
we will.
do you see any consolidation like beyond the normal kind of level that we saw in the past couple years?
In terms of like
I guess
trucking and
specifically
brokerage
around
and
brokerage or trucking. Yeah. I mean, we saw. Yeah. No.
the reality, like I've posted about this on LinkedIn, so somebody can go look up the post, or maybe it was Twitter. But JP Hampstead and I have talked about this before. But you know, fragmentation is good for shippers, and shippers are the market makers. If you
Right.
look at the operating ratios of
Totally.
full truckload versus LTL versus rail versus parcel, and
Right.
you look at what fragmentation looks like in each one of those spaces. So AB InBev could give all of their freight to CH Robinson, and CH Robinson could handle all of their freight, but they're not going to,
Right.
because fragmentation is good for them. And so,
I
I
I
think
did
that
a newsletter on this some point in 2021 called the Shippers Fragmentation Inclination. I totally 100% agree with you.
I haven't seen that.
They
I'll have to
essentially
go look it up.
induce the market to be fragmented because
Yeah,
they don't want to be in a situation where
that's right.
they're self-limiting. So
I mean, even if there's a trucking company that's able to service every single load at 20 cents a mile,
yeah,
I mean, I really like the big market making 150 shippers in the US that really make the market. They're not going to give all that freight to those because they recognize how short-sighted that would be.
yeah.
So
All right. This is how I wrap up every segment with my guests. Who's your favorite musician or band, and why? Most importantly.
that's a tough question for me, because I think everyone interesting in the world, like anybody who's like interesting as a person at all, and I don't necessarily know that that's me, but it's like I listen to a lot of stuff,
Of course,
and so
we
like
all
sometimes like
listen.
this,
Yeah,
sometimes
the
like that.
Spotify, the file. How easy it is to just listen to
The
everything.
challenge for me is I love 90s hip hop. I
Yes.
really do love 90s hip hop. So like Notorious B.I.G. and Nas are just like some of my favorite artists of all time. I'm an East Coast hip hop guy, um, but I'm actually gonna go with a band called Brand New. They're from Long Island. They are and this might be a little bit controversial because they got canceled a couple years ago. All right, Nicole. Shout out to Nicole. She said in the private chat, she said Brand New is her favorite.
He's from
You
Long
know
Island.
what I love about Brand New is, first of all, it's part of the reason that my wife and I connected. We connected over our love for cats and our love for Brand New,
That's
but
amazing.
also, as artists, I think the only thing you can really ask for from anyone is that you evolve over time.
Yeah,
You take in new information, you grow, you experience different things, you experiment.
yeah,
With artists, a lot of times they try and make the same album over and over, and Brand New has 5 albums, and every single album is fundamentally different than the album that came before it. And I find that very interesting.
So I'm gonna check them out because I certainly am aware of them, but I've not done enough listening to them.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the the recommendation. So I knew this was going to absolutely fly by, and it even caught
I
me
know.
off guard how fast this was. So I think
Me
at some
too.
point we'll have to do another episode that's literally like an hour and a half, and people are
Yeah.
just going to be forced to listen to us drone on. But
Or
Ryan,
not. They could always just
or
keep
not,
trolling.
no, they have to stay. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for
Have
having
a
me, EJ.
great
I
New
appreciate it, buddy.
Year. Yeah,
You
and
too.
cheers to everyone for a great 2023. But thanks so
Yeah.
much for joining us,
Same.
Ryan. Okay, so we are right at the end of the show. Let me quickly do the last dad joke of 2023. What do you call a candle that likes classic rock? Melton John. That works two ways because remember, Elton John did "Candle in the Wind." That's like a multi-layered joke that I think I stole and kind of made my own. In I did something to it to screw it up from the original joke, but you're welcome to use that at all of your holiday gatherings over the next couple weeks. Just send me the royalty check in the mail. Um, Everyone, thank you for coming today. Thank you for supporting the show throughout 2023 and before. I can't believe we're a year and a half into the show. I love doing it. I love talking this stuff. I hope that comes through every episode. We have a bunch of great guests lined up already for 2023. I'm booked, I think, through mid-February already. So can't wait to join you again. I think our next episode is January 6th. We have a really cool guest on an investor that I really like, who I can't wait for you all to hear him talk. In any case, have great holidays. Hope the supply chain stays a little less crazy as it has been for a little bit of time. I hope all picks up because we need some crazy to move. But in any case, thank you to Nicole, our amazing producer. Thank you to Sarah and all her team at Let's Talk Supply Chain. And happy holidays, everyone. Thank you also, Ryan, again, for being a great guest to take us home this year. Bye, everyone.